Some American cities aren't just shrinking, they're quietly giving up. Beautiful skylines, postcard sunsets, jazz on the corner, waterfronts that feel like magic, all slowly emptying out because people finally realize the bill behind the beauty is brutal. Some cities are losing families faster than they can repaint the welcome signs. Others are drowning in taxes, crime, or insurance premiums that look like ransom notes. And one place on this list literally ran out of safe drinking water. So here's the countdown of 10 cities people aren't moving to anymore, starting with the ones that still have a fighting chance. 10. St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis is gorgeous at first glance. The arch glows like a silver crescent at sunset. Neighborhoods feel cozy in that Midwestern way, and the old brick houses make you think every street has a story. It looks like a city families would settle in forever. But the numbers tell a different story, and they're loud. Since 2020, St. Louis has lost about 21,700 residents, the fastest drop among major American cities. And here's the part that stings. It's not because people don't love the place, it's that families just don't see a future there. A demographer said the issue clearly. Young singles are moving downtown for the new apartments and nightlife. But families with kids? They're packing the car seats and leaving. Schools have struggled with leadership scandals and constant transportation problems. Parents don't gamble with their children's education, so they're heading to suburbs or entirely new states where the school district isn't a news headline. Housing should fix this, but the city keeps building condos and no kids needed apartments instead of family homes. Rents keep climbing, and new housing permits dropped so low that St. Louis now ranks 58th in the nation for new construction, down from 47th the year before. And crime? Even though homicides dropped by about 40% since 2019, St. Louis still has one of the highest rates in the country. Perception alone is enough to scare away newcomers. St. Louis is beautiful, soulful, proud, but it isn't offering what families need to stay. And families are the population engine. Once they leave, a city's heartbeat gets quieter. 9. Hartford, Connecticut. Hartford looks like a New England postcard. Historic buildings, leafy streets, colonial charm, the kind of place where you expect life to feel calm and elevated. But nobody tells you the calm comes with a tax bill that feels like a punchline. Hartford lost residents again last year, dropping to about 119,970, and the reason is simple. Living here costs more than it makes sense. Property taxes are outrageous. Hartford's effective tax rate is 6.90%, one of the highest in America, on houses that aren't even expensive. A median home value sits around $60,785. Yet the average annual tax bill is over $4,100. That's a luxury tax rate on a starter home budget. Add Connecticut's sky-high electricity prices, second only to Hawaii, and many people feel like they're paying premium rates to live a very regular life. And the income doesn't balance it out. Hartford's median household income is only $45,300, which makes the cost of groceries, utilities, and rent feel suffocating. Over half of renters are considered cost-burdened, meaning they're paying more than 30% of their income just to stay housed. Job opportunities? Stagnant. Connecticut lost nearly 80,000 manufacturing jobs since the early 2000s. The insurance sector, Hartford's old backbone, isn't pulling in young workers the way it used to. Schools struggle with performance, crime remains a worry, and thousands of residents leave the state every year for cheaper places with the same level of peace and better weather. Hartford is beautiful on the surface, but the math has turned it into a place people can't afford to love. 8. Charleston, West Virginia. Charleston is breathtaking in that Appalachian way. Misty mornings over forested hills, rivers that look like they belong in a painting, and small-town charm wrapped around a state capital. It's peaceful, quiet, almost cinematic. But behind that beauty is a city losing residents faster than it can tell its story. Charleston's population has dropped from 47,944 to 46,838 in just 2 years. And over the long run, it's lost 6,834 people across 2 decades. The problem starts with the workforce. West Virginia has the lowest labor force participation rate in America, 54.6%, meaning nearly half the working-age population isn't working. A state demographer said the state would need 100,000 new workers just to reach the national average. Employers see that and think, not worth the investment. Then comes the health crisis. West Virginia has the highest rate of preventable deaths in the country and the highest opioid overdose rate at 71.4 deaths per 100,000. That kind of reputation, and the real pain behind it, scares away newcomers, young families, and industries that want a stable workforce. Coal's collapse hit Charleston like a wrecking ball. The jobs vanished, and nothing equally strong replaced them. With fewer workers and fewer employers, the tax base shrinks. And when the tax base shrinks, schools, roads, and public services suffer. Charleston is beautiful, soulful, and has the kind of natural landscapes people dream about. But dreams don't outweigh empty job boards, a shrinking economy, and a public health crisis that hasn't slowed down. And in the end, people are leaving not because they want to, but because staying feels like standing still. 7. Anchorage, Alaska. Anchorage sits between mountains and the Cook Inlet like a screensaver you'd want to live in. Snow-capped peaks, moose crossing the road, the kind of sunsets that make your phone camera cry. It's rugged and gorgeous, the frontier fantasy. But the fantasy runs into a brick wall the second you check the cost of living. Anchorage's average single-family home now costs $514,000, up 40% since 2019. And the city only permitted 237 new housing units in 2024, which is barely anything for a place trying to grow. Scarcity keeps prices high and newcomers out. Groceries? Painful. Everything gets flown or shipped in. A simple grocery run feels like paying shipping fees with every item, and wages aren't rising fast enough to make the math work. Then there's crime. Anchorage's violent and property crimes rose 8% since 2021, even as the rest of the country improved. Alaska overall had 728 violent crime incidents per 100,000 people, nearly double the national rate. Add visible homelessness, vandalism, and long police response times, and the safety issue becomes real. And we can't ignore the cold. Winters are long, dark, and punishing. Many people from the lower 48 visit Alaska and think, I could live here. Then they experience one January afternoon when the sun sets at 3 p.m. and rethink everything. Anchorage is stunning, genuinely, but beauty alone can't fix cost, crime, isolation, and housing shortages. People aren't avoiding Anchorage because they dislike nature. They're avoiding it because life feels like a constant uphill climb in snow boots. 6. Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore is cinematic. Row houses painted in warm colors, waterfront views in the inner harbor, neighborhoods filled with music, art, and food that hits your soul. There's culture here, real culture, but the population doesn't reflect that love anymore. Baltimore fell from 576,578 people to 565,239 in just 2 years. And it's one of the only places in Maryland still losing residents while the state grows. Ask residents why, and they'll give you the same answer: taxes, schools, and safety. Economist Anirban Basu literally called them the Big Three. Baltimore's property tax rate is more than twice Maryland's average, and water and sewer bills are some of the highest in the country. People feel like they're paying premium rates for services that don't show up. Schools are underperforming, especially in lower-income neighborhoods. Families don't want to roll the dice with their kids' education. Violent crime remains a huge concern. Yes, homicides dropped by about 22% in the first half of 2025, but the reputation lingers, and reputation matters when a family decides where to move. And while Maryland as a whole adds residents, Baltimore keeps losing them. That means fewer taxpayers, which leads to worse services, which leads to an even smaller population. Baltimore has energy, flavor, and personality. But until the cost, crime, and schooling issues improve, many residents feel like they can find that same energy elsewhere, without the heavy price tag. 5. Chicago, Illinois. Chicago is a city that seduces you instantly. The skyline cuts the sky like a knife. The lake looks like an ocean pretending to be calm, and the neighborhoods feel like a mosaic of food, music, and generations stacked together. Chicago feels alive, until you look at the numbers and wonder if everyone else already packed up and left. Because somehow, this iconic city is now at its lowest population since 1920, losing more than 8,000 people in a single recent year, and over 128,000 since 2014. The biggest shock? The taxes hit harder than the wind. Illinois has the highest property tax rate in America at 1.83%, and Chicago's share feels even heavier. Residents joke that paying property taxes is like paying rent on a house you already own. A survey even showed 34% of Chicagoans would leave if they could, and 39% blamed affordability. Then there's the crime. Chicago has led the nation in murder counts for 13 straight years, and only 16.2% of reported crimes result in an arrest. That's the kind of statistic that makes you check your car twice before locking it. Add in decades of deindustrialization, high unemployment compared to other major metros, and a pension crisis draining city funds. And Chicago starts to feel like a beautiful house where the pipes have been leaking for a decade. Chicago is charismatic, bold, and unforgettable, but it's also expensive, chaotic, and exhausting. And people are choosing peace over pizza. 4. New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans is the kind of city that hits you with emotion before you even unpack. The brass bands echoing through the quarter, the smell of gumbo drifting between shotgun houses, the soft glow of street lamps reflecting on rain-soaked pavement. It feels like living inside a story. But behind the music is a quiet exit. New Orleans' population has fallen from 380,408 to 376,035 in 1 year, and the wider metro has lost about 40,000 residents since 2020. The biggest villain isn't the culture, it's the cost of staying alive. Louisiana's insurance crisis is suffocating homeowners. Flood insurance premiums under risk rating 2.0 have exploded so violently that the state dropped 70,000 policies. One homeowner saw her premium jump from $400 to $650 overnight, and that wasn't even considered extreme. Crime adds a harder edge. Orleans Parish has the highest homicide rate among large U.S. counties, and residents constantly report carjackings, robberies, and shootings. It's emotionally draining to live somewhere that feels brilliant in the day and unpredictable at night. And the jobs? Fragile. Louisiana's job growth since 2000 sits around 2%, compared to the nation's 20%. Many restaurants and small businesses closed in 2025, crushed by rising costs and falling foot traffic. New Orleans is still soul, rhythm, and flavor, but culture can't compete with hurricanes, insurance bills, and fear. People love the city, but they're leaving for a chance to breathe. 3. San Francisco, California. San Francisco still looks like a dream from a distance. Fog rolling like slow-motion waves, pastel houses stacked on hillsides, the Golden Gate standing like a red miracle above the bay. It's cinematic, romantic, and ridiculously photogenic. But the residents? They're checking out faster than hotel guests. The population is now 3.6% lower than in 2020, and the city lost another 3,300 residents just between January 2024 and 2025. The biggest shock is that even a 25% drop in home prices hasn't helped. Buying still means coughing up nearly $1 million, and renting a small apartment costs $3,000 plus a month, if your landlord even approves you. Add in state income taxes, San Francisco's heavy business taxes, and endless regulatory hoops, and companies have been stampeding toward Texas, Florida, and Nevada. When businesses leave, their employees follow. Quality of life has taken a hit too. Homelessness remains visible, open-air drug use plagues entire neighborhoods, and property crime rarely lets up. Downtown office towers sit half-empty, turning the city's financial core into something that feels like a weekday ghost town. Remote work was the final push. Why stay somewhere this expensive when your job doesn't require you to? People realized they could keep the salary, but ditch the stress. San Francisco is still breathtaking, but for many, the price of admission isn't worth the view anymore. 2. Honolulu, Hawaii. Honolulu is the kind of place that feels unreal. Turquoise water, palm trees brushing against a warm breeze, mountains rising behind the skyline like a movie set. It's gorgeous to the point of disbelief. But living there? That's where the dream cracks. Honolulu's population has dropped 1.7% since 2020, and the island keeps watching locals pack up and fly out because the cost of staying has turned into a financial endurance test. The median home price sits above $1 million, and a simple one-bedroom apartment runs around $1,800. Groceries are painfully inflated. Milk costs more than $6, and electricity is almost 3 times the national average. You start to feel like the islands are taxing you for the privilege of breathing ocean air. The economy doesn't balance it out either. Tourism accounts for about 20% of the state's GDP, which means wages stay low and career paths stay limited. Young families especially feel squeezed. With mainland developers turning neighborhoods into investment playgrounds, locals joke that living in Honolulu feels like winning the lottery and immediately losing it to bills. And the demographic shift hurts. Working-age adults are fleeing to Nevada, California, and Texas, leaving behind retirees and tourists, a fragile mix for long-term stability. Honolulu isn't failing, it's becoming inaccessible. Paradise is still paradise, just not for the people who grew up there. 1. Jackson, Mississippi. Jackson should feel powerful. It's a state capital, full of history, culture, and southern warmth. But today, Jackson feels exhausted. The city is shrinking faster than anywhere else on this list, down 9.44% since 2020, with an annual decline of negative 2.04%. And the causes aren't vague issues. They're catastrophic, headline-level failures. Start with the thing a city needs most: water. In 2022, Jackson's water system collapsed. Residents spent over a month without safe drinking water. That disaster wasn't a random accident. It exposed decades of mismanagement, neglect, and political chaos. Crime adds another layer of fear. Jackson recorded 99.5 homicides per 100,000 residents in 2021 and 78.8 in 2022, numbers so high they hardly feel real. Families aren't just leaving for better jobs, they're leaving for safety. The economy is no anchor either. Jackson's poverty rate sits at 26.83%, with businesses fleeing and schools deteriorating. In 2023, a dispute between the mayor and a waste contractor left the city without trash collection for over a month. Imagine trying to convince new residents to move into a place where even garbage pickup gets political. Jackson has heart, it has talent, it has people who care deeply. But right now, the city is fighting too many battles at once. Infrastructure, crime, poverty, leadership, and residents are escaping because they can't afford to hope anymore. When you look at these cities, none of them fell apart overnight. It was one bill, one bad policy, one family leaving at a time. People aren't chasing perfection, just stability. And until these places fix the cracks, the exits will stay crowded. Subscribe for more stories that show what's really happening beneath the skyline.